The desert stretched endlessly, its golden sands shimmering under the harsh twin suns. The air was dry, suffocating, and the only sound was the wind whispering through the dunes. The alien princess, once proud and powerful, now lay on the ground, her golden armor battered and scarred. Her skin, usually glowing with the radiance of royalty, was now dull, almost lifeless. She had been left behind, forgotten, by her people. Her name was Kira, the last heir to an ancient dynasty, now reduced to nothing more than a shadow in the wasteland. She had once commanded armies, held sway over entire planets, but now she was nothing. The planet she had been sent to was supposed to be a safe haven, a place to wait out the war, but it had turned into her prison. No one knew she was here, and no one cared. Her body ached, her throat dry from thirst, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. She had no strength left. The faint glow of her skin was almost gone, and the weight of her own thoughts felt heavier than the armor she once wore with pride. She thought about her family, her people, who had sent her here, not to protect her, but to discard her. A useless princess, they had said, too weak to fight. They had given her a mission to survive, but now it seemed that survival was the cruelest fate of all. Kira coughed, her body trembling with weakness. She could feel the last remnants of her energy draining away with every breath. But then, as if summoned by fate, she heard something. The faintest of sounds in the distance, growing louder with each passing moment. A voice? No, it couldn't be. She must have imagined it. But no. There it was again. A human voice, unmistakable, cutting through the silence. Her heart skipped a beat. No human had come to this planet before. She had assumed that they, too, had forgotten her, that they had abandoned this corner of the galaxy long ago. Yet here was this voice, growing closer. With what little strength she had left, Kira forced herself to sit up, her vision blurred by the tears that stung her eyes. Through the haze of her failing sight, she saw him. A man. Strong, tall, with dark hair and a confident stride. He wore minimal clothing, his muscular build evident even from this distance. The human walked toward her, the heat of the desert air rising around him, but he seemed unfazed by it all. He stopped a few feet away, and for a moment, their eyes locked. She didn't know what to make of him. Was he another soldier sent to finish her off? Was he some kind of hunter, coming to claim the bounty on her head? Or was he simply lost, a fool wandering into the heart of this unforgiving planet? She couldn't help herself. The anger and frustration that had been building up inside her for so long now bubbled to the surface. "You're too late," she spat, her voice hoarse. "There's no one left. No one who cares." The man didn't flinch. Instead, a smirk played across his lips. "Oh, I think you're wrong, princess. You've got me now." Kira blinked, taken aback. He wasn't afraid of her. He wasn't even concerned about her alien form or the fact that she could end his life in an instant. "You think you can survive this desert alone?" he asked, his voice calm, almost mocking. "You really thought you could make it out here without help?" Kira's blood boiled. How dare he speak to her like that? She was a princess, a leader, someone whose very name had once struck fear into the hearts of her enemies. And yet here she was, on her knees in the sand, completely at the mercy of this stranger. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice low but filled with defiance. The man chuckled. "A human. Just a guy who knows how to survive in places like this." He stepped closer, his gaze never leaving hers. "Looks like you've got a lot to learn, princess." Kira narrowed her eyes. "You're wasting your time." "I'm not weak, I'm not helpless." "I can?" "Sure, you can," the man interrupted. "But what's the point? You're alone out here. There's no one coming to save you." His words struck her like a slap. It was the truth, but hearing it from him felt like an insult. She could feel the heat rising in her chest, a fire of anger and shame. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The desert wind howled around them, the silence between them thick with tension. Kira's mind raced. This human was mocking her, but there was something about him, something in the way he stood, unafraid and confident. He wasn't just here by accident. He was here because he wanted something. And she would make sure he didn't get it. But what if she was wrong? What if, for once, someone had come to help her, to save her from this hell? Could she trust him? Kira took a deep breath, steadying herself. Her pride wouldn't let her admit weakness, but for the first time in what felt like forever, she felt unsure. "You think you can help me?" she asked, her voice quieter now. He shrugged, an arrogant grin spreading across his face. "I'm not here to save you, princess. But if you're smart, you'll accept the help. Because out here, you either fight, or you die." With that, he turned his back on her, walking toward the distant horizon. Kira watched him go, her heart pounding in her chest. She had to make a choice. Follow him. Or stay behind and face her fate alone. Kira stared after him, a dangerous thought creeping into her mind. She could follow him, but she didn't know what to expect. Did she want to be saved, or did she want to prove she didn't need him? Naughty question for comments. What would you do if you were in her shoes? Would you trust him, or take matters into your own hands? The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the barren desert, as Kira slowly rose to her feet. Her body ached, but the sight of the human in the distance stirred something inside her. She wasn't sure if it was anger or curiosity, but the need to prove herself once again was stronger than the hunger gnawing at her stomach. She couldn't allow herself to be weak. She was a princess, a warrior, someone who had led entire fleets into battle. And yet, here she was, following a human through the desert, her pride and survival in a delicate balance. As she caught up to him, the human barely glanced back, focused on his path. His confidence, his ease in this hostile environment, frustrated her. Who did he think he was? "Do you always move this slowly?" he asked without turning. "Or is it just the princess in you that drags her feet?" She gritted her teeth. "I'm not a princess to you. I'm a survivor." Sure, he replied, as though her words meant little more than the wind at his back. "You're a survivor. That's why you were sitting in the sand waiting for someone to help you." The insult hit her hard, but she swallowed her pride. If this was how he was going to treat her, then so be it. She would prove him wrong. Her heart raced as she quickened her pace, walking alongside him, no longer trailing behind. She watched his every move, the way he handled himself, the ease with which he navigated the landscape. The human had a quiet arrogance about him, something she could not ignore. "You never answered my question," Kira said, her voice low but intense. "What's your real mission here?" For a long moment, he didn't respond. She could feel his gaze on her, but he didn't say a word. Then, finally, he stopped, turned, and faced her, his eyes locking with hers. "I'm here to get something," he said, his voice steady, unshaken by the harshness of the desert. "And you're in my way." Her eyes narrowed. "In your way? What is it you think you're going to find here? This place is nothing but sand and death." "You're wrong," he said, his lips curling into a small, knowing smile. "There's always something in the desert. Something valuable. And when you've been around as long as I have, you learn how to find it." She couldn't believe what she was hearing. A human with the audacity to think he could outsmart her in a place like this? She had faced far worse. But the way he spoke, the ease in his confidence, it was unnerving. "You think I'm just going to follow you like some naive child?" Kira asked, crossing her arms, trying to hide the unease creeping up her spine. The human shrugged nonchalantly. "I don't care what you do. You can stay here and die, or you can follow me and live. Your choice." The boldness of his words sent a chill down her spine. She didn't need to hear more. He was a human, fragile, weak, disposable. And yet, the longer she traveled with him, the more her instincts told her he was not what he seemed. He wasn't like the soldiers she had known, who only cared for survival. There was something else, something dangerous, hidden behind those dark eyes. They walked in silence for what seemed like hours. The sun dipped lower in the sky, and the temperature began to drop. Kira felt the coldness seep into her bones, but she refused to acknowledge it. She wasn't about to let a human see her weakness. As the stars began to twinkle above, the human suddenly stopped. Kira almost bumped into him but quickly regained her balance. He stood still, scanning the horizon, his eyes focused on something she couldn't see. "What is it?" she asked, her voice sharp with impatience. "There's something out there," he said quietly, his voice filled with tension. "We need to hide." Before she could protest, he pulled her down, pushing her behind a large rock. Kira's pulse quickened as she crouched beside him. She didn't know what he had seen, but the urgency in his voice told her it was something dangerous. They waited in silence. The only sounds were the soft rustling of the wind and the thumping of her own heartbeat. And then, in the distance, she saw them. A group of alien soldiers, moving stealthily across the dunes, their armor gleaming in the moonlight. They were searching for something, her, perhaps. Or him. Or both. Kira's heart raced. She knew these soldiers. They were part of the faction that had exiled her, left her to die in this forsaken desert. They wouldn't hesitate to kill her on sight. And the human, they would never let him leave alive. The human looked at her, his face hard, his eyes filled with determination. "Stay quiet," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "We wait until they pass." Kira nodded, her body tensed and ready to move. She had to make a choice, stay hidden and wait for them to pass, or take a risk and fight. She glanced at the human, and for the first time, she considered something she had never allowed herself to think before. What if he was more than just a nuisance? What if he was the key to her survival? The soldiers were getting closer, their footsteps echoing in the silent night. The human turned to Kira, his face unreadable. "Ready to make your move?" he asked, his voice low. Naughty question for comments. Will Kira trust the human and risk everything, or will she take matters into her own hands? The soldiers were nearly upon them. Kira's breath caught in her throat, her senses on high alert. The sound of their footsteps was like thunder in her ears, each step bringing them closer. The human beside her was as still as a statue, his eyes trained on the group of aliens marching past, barely a whisper of movement in his stance. He was waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Kira's mind raced. She could feel the heat of the soldiers' gaze even from this distance, their instinct to seek and destroy nothing more than a matter of time. She knew they would come for her, they had once called her a failure, but they wouldn't give her a second chance. In the silence of the desert night, Kira's pulse quickened as the soldiers drew closer. The human's hand, now resting on a sharp rock near him, moved silently, as if preparing for something. She looked at him, wondering what kind of plan he had. There was no time to waste. They would be spotted if they waited much longer. The human caught her eye and, with a barely perceptible movement, signaled to her. It was time to act. Without a word, Kira sprang into action, silently crawling behind the boulders, her heart pounding. The human moved with the same precision, a shadow in the night. As they snaked their way around the rocks, Kira couldn't help but notice how easily the human navigated the harsh landscape, how the night seemed to respond to his every move. He was more than just a survivor. He was a master of his surroundings. The more she watched him, the more she realized he was a force to be reckoned with. The group of alien soldiers passed them by, unaware of their presence. The tension in Kira's chest eased for a moment, but she didn't let her guard down. They weren't out of danger yet. The human turned to her, his lips curling into a half smile. "Nice moves, princess. Looks like you're finally learning." She ignored the jab, too focused on the task at hand. "Let's move. They'll be back." The human gave a quick nod, and together, they continued to move swiftly and silently. Kira's eyes darted around the desert landscape, searching for any sign of danger. The last thing she wanted was to be caught off guard again. As they approached a rocky cliff, the human motioned for her to stop. He crouched low, his eyes scanning the horizon. "I think we're safe for now," he murmured. "But we can't stay here long. The patrols are going to increase, and we need to find shelter." Kira's mind was racing, still processing everything that had happened. The way the human had handled the situation, the way he had acted without hesitation, she couldn't deny that he had saved her life. Again. "Where do we go now?" she asked, her voice laced with doubt. She didn't know if she could trust him completely, but there was no other choice. For now, he was her only chance at survival. The human looked over his shoulder, his eyes glinting with something dangerous. "We go where they won't find us. Follow me." He led her through a series of hidden caves, each one darker and colder than the last. The further they went, the more Kira felt herself drawn to him. Not just because he was the only person who could help her, but because of something more, something she couldn't put into words. There was a fire in him, something that spoke to her deepest instincts. He was different from anyone she had ever met. Finally, they arrived at a small alcove, nestled deep in the rocks. The human gave her a quick look, a silent message passing between them. "We wait here. The soldiers won't think to look this deep in the canyon." Kira nodded, sliding down against the stone wall, her body aching from the constant movement. She was tired, exhausted in ways she had never experienced before. But the human was different. He moved with a purpose, a fire burning in his eyes that kept her on edge. He sat beside her, his face a mixture of exhaustion and determination. "You should get some rest. We've got a long day ahead." Kira glanced at him, her instincts telling her to keep her guard up. But there was something in his gaze, something that made her hesitate. He wasn't just looking at her like a stranger, but something more personal. Something dangerous. She looked away, her mind a whirl of confusion. The human had become a mystery she couldn't solve. She had to stay focused on the mission, survive, escape. But the longer she spent with him, the harder it was to ignore the pull between them. The silence stretched between them, the only sound the wind rustling outside the cave. And for a moment, Kira allowed herself to relax. Just for a moment. Then, the human broke the silence. "Tell me something, princess," he said, his voice low. "You've been hiding your real thoughts for a while now. What are you really thinking?" Kira stiffened. She had been careful, never letting her true feelings show. But there was something about him, something that made her want to drop the walls she had spent so long building. "I'm thinking. I don't know who to trust anymore," she admitted. "I don't know if you're here to help me, or if you're just using me to get what you want." The human didn't answer right away. He simply looked at her, his expression unreadable. For a long moment, she thought he wouldn't say anything. Then, with a soft sigh, he spoke again. "I'm not using you, princess. I'm helping you. But don't get too comfortable. This place, it's full of secrets. And we're just scratching the surface." His words sent a chill through her. What did he mean by secrets? What was he hiding? Naughty question for comments. What do you think the human is hiding from Kira? The night stretched on, the desert silence broken only by the occasional whisper of the wind against the rocks. Kira sat against the cold stone, her mind spinning. The human had saved her once again, but she couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something. There was more to him than he was letting on. Something that didn't quite add up. The human, sitting just a few feet away, was fiddling with a small device in his hands, his brow furrowed in concentration. The glow from the device reflected in his eyes, but he didn't look up. He seemed deep in thought, focused on something important. Kira couldn't take it anymore. She had to know. "You're not just some wanderer, are you?" she asked, her voice cutting through the silence. He glanced up at her, his face hardening for just a split second before he masked it with a smirk. "And what makes you think that?" "I've seen the way you move, the way you handle yourself," she replied, her voice steady but full of suspicion. "You're not just surviving out here. You've got a plan. You always have a plan." He didn't deny it. Instead, he shrugged, the movement almost lazy. "Maybe I do. Or maybe I'm just a guy trying to get by in a world that's trying to kill him. Kira narrowed her eyes, her instincts telling her that there was more to this human than met the eye. She wasn't sure if she could trust him completely, but for now, he was the only one who could help her survive. "So, what's your real mission?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why are you really here?" For a long moment, the human didn't respond. His gaze shifted back to the device in his hands, his fingers moving quickly as he adjusted something on the screen. He seemed reluctant to answer. Finally, he set the device down and leaned back against the rock, crossing his arms over his chest. His eyes met hers, and for the first time, she saw something in them. Something raw, something desperate. "I'm not here because I want to be," he said, his voice low and filled with a strange sadness. "I've got a mission. A job. But it's not just any job." Kira's curiosity piqued, her eyes locked onto his. "What kind of job?" The human hesitated, as if weighing his words carefully. Then, with a sigh, he continued. "I'm here to stop something. Something big. And if I don't succeed, everything we know could be destroyed. That's why I'm not just here for you. I'm here for something much worse than what you're running from." The weight of his words hit Kira hard, her breath catching in her throat. What could be worse than the soldiers hunting her? What could be more dangerous than the enemies she had faced in her life? "Something worse," she repeated, her voice barely audible. "What are you talking about?" The human leaned in slightly, his eyes locking with hers, and for the first time, she saw the truth behind his eyes. He wasn't just a soldier. He was a man on a mission, and the stakes were higher than she could have imagined. "There's a war coming," he said quietly. "Not just between your people and mine, but something much darker. Something that's been hiding in the shadows for centuries. And if we don't stop it now, it will destroy everything." Kira felt her heart race as the weight of his words sank in. A war? A war that would threaten the entire galaxy? She couldn't imagine the scale of what he was talking about, but the fear in his eyes told her that he wasn't lying. "Why didn't you tell me this earlier?" she asked, her voice laced with frustration. The human's gaze softened for a moment, and he sighed deeply. "I didn't trust you. Not at first. And I thought maybe I could handle it alone. But now I know I need your help." Kira's thoughts raced. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about something bigger. Something she couldn't ignore. The alien princess who had once been so certain of her future now felt small and insignificant in the face of such a grand, terrifying mission. But there was something else too. The human had trusted her with his secret, and that trust, it meant something. She had never been one to follow orders, but this wasn't just about survival. This was about saving everything. And maybe, just maybe, it was about saving herself, too. "I'll help you," she said, her voice filled with determination. "But you owe me one. No more secrets." The human gave a small nod, the faintest smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "Deal." For the first time since she had been abandoned on this desolate planet, Kira felt a spark of hope. Maybe this human wasn't just a random survivor. Maybe, just maybe, he was the ally she had been waiting for. But there was still so much she didn't know. So much she didn't understand about the war he was talking about. What was he really hiding? And what did it mean for her? As they stood up and prepared to leave the safety of the cave, Kira couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to get much worse before they got better. The human turned to her one last time before they ventured deeper into the canyon. "Stay close," he said, his voice firm. "The real challenge is just beginning." Kira felt a chill run down her spine. The way he spoke, there was a coldness to it, as if he knew something she didn't. And what was he really preparing for? Naughty question for comments. What do you think the human's real mission is? Is he telling Kira the whole truth? The next morning, the first rays of sunlight sliced through the cracks in the canyon walls, casting a soft, golden glow over the desert below. Kira woke to find the human already packing his gear, his movement swift and efficient. His calm demeanor was almost unsettling. She sat up, stretching her stiff limbs, and watched him for a moment. There was no doubt he had a plan, and it wasn't one she was fully included in. The weight of their silent understanding hung in the air, unspoken but palpable. She wasn't sure if she could trust him completely yet, but they were in this together now, for better or worse. The human didn't look up as he gathered his things. "You ready to move?" he asked, his voice as steady as ever. Kira stood up, dusting the sand off her clothes. Her body ached from the constant travel, the days spent with no rest, but she didn't let it show. She had learned long ago that showing weakness was a luxury she could not afford. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice colder than she intended. The human glanced at her, a faint grin tugging at his lips. "You don't ask a lot of questions for a princess." Kira narrowed her eyes. "I don't need to. I'm here to survive, not to play games with you." He chuckled, shaking his head. "You're no fun." Her irritation flared, but she held it back. "Let's just get this over with." He didn't argue. Instead, he began walking toward the rocky terrain, his footsteps sure and confident. Kira followed, her mind racing. She needed answers. Why was he so confident? What exactly was he planning to do? The desert around them was still vast, empty, and unforgiving. As they moved deeper into the canyon, Kira couldn't help but notice how easily he navigated the terrain, almost like he had been here before. The human didn't hesitate, even when they reached a particularly narrow pass, where the rocks seemed to close in around them. "Where are we going?" Kira asked again, more urgently this time. The human didn't look back. "There's a place ahead where we can rest. It's not far. I'm just trying to avoid the patrols." Kira felt a twinge of frustration. "If we're avoiding patrols, then why didn't you tell me about the mission sooner?" He stopped walking and finally turned to face her, his eyes dark and intense. "Because you wouldn't have believed me. You wouldn't have cared." "Try me," she shot back. The human's eyes softened slightly, a rare moment of vulnerability crossing his face. "I didn't want to drag you into something that wasn't your fight. But now I need your help." Kira stared at him, unsure of how to respond. There was something in his eyes that made her question everything. He wasn't just some soldier. He wasn't just some random human trying to survive in the desert. He had a mission. A dangerous one. And she was part of it now, whether she liked it or not. Before she could say anything else, he turned and continued walking. "We'll talk when we get to the shelter." Kira fell in step beside him, her thoughts racing. She had never trusted anyone, especially not a human. But this situation was different. The human was right about one thing: this wasn't just her fight anymore. She had a part to play, whether she wanted to or not. As the canyon walls narrowed, the temperature dropped, and the wind picked up, biting at their exposed skin. The human led the way, his eyes constantly scanning the surroundings. Kira couldn't help but admire his focus. He was so sure of himself, so certain that he knew what he was doing. It made her question everything she knew about survival. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they reached a small, hidden alcove between the rocks. The human gestured for her to enter first. "After you, princess," he said, a teasing glint in his eyes. Kira shot him a look but entered the alcove anyway. The space was small, but it provided shelter from the harsh winds and offered a much-needed respite from their journey. She took a seat on the cool stone floor, grateful for the temporary relief. The human followed her in, closing the entrance behind him. He sat down across from her, his expression serious now. The teasing smile was gone, replaced by the same intense look he had given her earlier. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low. Kira crossed her arms over her chest, watching him closely. "I'm listening." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "The truth is, I didn't want you to be involved in this. But I can't do it alone. This war, it's not just between our two species. There's something bigger happening, something we can't ignore. And if we don't stop it now, everything will be destroyed." Kira frowned. What exactly are you saying? The human looked at her, his eyes dark and serious. I'm saying that the enemies you've been running from aren't just your enemies. They're part of something bigger, something that spans the galaxy. And it's coming for all of us. The gravity of his words hit Kira like a punch to the stomach. She had known there was something more, something behind the war, but this? This was something she wasn't prepared for. I don't understand, she admitted, her voice shaking slightly. What do you want from me? The human stood up and paced for a moment, then stopped, turning to face her. I want you to help me stop this. To fight alongside me. Together, we can stop it. Kira's mind raced. This was no longer just about her survival. This was about something far bigger. She had a choice to make: stay hidden in the shadows and hope for survival, or step forward and fight for something that could save everything. But there was still so much she didn't know. Could she trust him? Did he really have a plan? Or was he just using her for his own gain? Before she could ask more questions, he spoke again. There's one more thing, he said quietly. We're not the only ones looking for answers. The enemy knows we're out here. They'll come for us. Kira's heart skipped a beat. The enemy was already close? Was there no place safe left? The realization hit her harder than any physical blow. Naughty question for comments. What's going to happen when the enemy catches up to them? Will Kira trust the human, or will she take matters into her own hands? The shadows inside the alcove grew longer as the human paced back and forth, his eyes scanning the small shelter they had taken refuge in. Kira sat still, her mind reeling from his words. The realization that they were not alone out here, that the enemy was already close, gnawed at her. The stakes were higher than she had imagined, and yet she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being pulled deeper into something much bigger than herself. We can't stay here long, the human said, his voice breaking through her spiraling thoughts. We need to move. Now. Kira stood up, a wave of urgency sweeping through her. What do you mean? How close are they? The human stopped pacing and looked at her, his face grim. Too close. They've been tracking us. We're not just dealing with the soldiers who exiled you. There's something more dangerous out there. A shadow organization with its eyes on the entire galaxy. They've been waiting for the right moment to strike. Kira felt a chill run down her spine. Her mind flashed back to the soldiers who had once called her weak. She had been abandoned, thrown into the desert, forgotten. But now, it seemed that her enemies were much more powerful, much more organized than she had realized. They can't be that powerful, she said, more to herself than to him. The soldiers I faced were nothing compared to what we've already survived. The human's gaze softened for a moment, but his voice remained steady. You're right. The soldiers you've faced are just pawns. The real enemy is something far darker. And we're running out of time. Kira's fists clenched. She didn't know whether to feel fear or rage. So what do we do now? We run? We hide? What's the plan? The human didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked over to the small device he had been fiddling with earlier. He activated it, and a holographic map of the area appeared in the air between them. This is the only route we can take, he said, pointing to a winding path on the map that led through a series of caves deeper into the mountains. It's dangerous, but it's the fastest way out. If we stay here much longer, we'll be caught. And once they find us, there's no escaping them. Kira's eyes scanned the map, her mind calculating the risks. She could feel the pressure mounting. Every choice she made from this point on would determine her fate, and perhaps the fate of the galaxy itself. What's so special about this route? She asked, narrowing her eyes at the path on the map. The human's lips curled into a wry smile. It's not about what's special about the route. It's about what's not on it. The enemy doesn't know it exists. That's the only reason we stand a chance of getting through. She glanced at him, trying to read his expression. There was something in his eyes, a flicker of doubt or perhaps something darker. But before she could ask, He turned away, packing the device into his bag. "We move out in 5 minutes," he said, his tone firm, no room for argument. Kira wasn't ready to leave, not yet. There was still too much she didn't know about him, about the mission, about the war he kept hinting at. And if she was going to trust him, she needed answers. "What's your real goal?" she asked, stepping closer. "You keep saying there's a war coming, something bigger. But what exactly are we fighting for? What's your mission really about?" The human stopped mid-motion, his face hardening. He didn't speak for a long time, the silence stretching between them like a wall. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, guarded. "I told you before," he said quietly, his back still to her. "I'm here to stop a force that's been manipulating everything from the shadows. If I don't succeed, everything, your world, mine, the whole galaxy, will be destroyed." Kira's mind raced. She could feel the weight of his words sinking in, the enormity of the situation pressing down on her chest. But there was something in his tone, a flicker of uncertainty, that made her question his sincerity. Was he telling the truth, or was he just trying to get her to follow him blindly? "Why me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why choose me to fight this war? You could have found someone else." The human turned to face her, his eyes filled with a depth of emotion she hadn't expected. "Because you're not just a princess, Kira. You're a fighter. And more than that, you're the key to stopping them." Her heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean, I'm the key?" The human took a step toward her, his voice quieter now, as if speaking a secret he had kept hidden for too long. "Your bloodline, it's tied to something ancient. Something that can stop them. The enemy has been searching for you, Kira. Not just because you're a princess, but because of what you can do. You're more powerful than you realize." Kira stood frozen, her mind struggling to grasp his words. Her bloodline? She had always known her heritage meant something, but she had never imagined it could be this important. "I don't understand," she admitted, her voice shaking. "What do you want me to do?" The human stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "I want you to trust me. Trust that I'm not just dragging you into this for my own gain. This isn't just about survival anymore. It's about saving everything. Together, we can stop them." Kira's heart pounded in her chest. She could feel the weight of the decision before her. Trust him. Follow him into the unknown. She had always been a fighter. But this? This was something else. Something bigger. As she stood there, staring into the human's eyes, the ground suddenly trembled beneath them. A low rumble echoed through the canyon, followed by the unmistakable sound of engines approaching. The enemy was closer than she thought. The moment of truth had arrived. Naughty question for comments. Will Kira trust the human, or will she face the enemy on her own? The ground trembled beneath them, the vibration so strong they could feel the dust falling from the rocks above. Kira's heart pounded as she glanced at the human. His expression had hardened, the playful demeanor replaced with the focused intensity of someone who knew what was coming. She could see it in his eyes, he wasn't just worried, he was prepared. "They're here," he muttered under his breath, already moving toward the entrance of the alcove. Kira barely had time to react before the human grabbed her arm, pulling her to her feet. She didn't resist. Something in his grip, firm but not painful, spoke of urgency, of a necessity she couldn't ignore. They had no time to waste. The enemy had found them. She could hear the distant hum of engines growing louder. Alien ships. The kind she'd seen during her worst days. The soldiers had arrived, but they weren't alone. There were too many of them. Far too many. The human didn't waste any more time with words. He turned toward the narrow exit of the cave and gestured for her to follow. Kira's mind raced as she followed him, her body moving almost automatically. She didn't have a choice. It was either run or die. The human led her through the winding canyon, his pace unrelenting. His movements were calculated, sure, like someone who had been through this before. Kira could feel the panic rising in her chest, but she pushed it down. She had no room for fear. Not now. As they emerged from the shadows of the canyon, the wide open desert stretched before them, the horizon hazy under the hot sun. The alien ships were visible now, their dark shapes cutting through the sky as they scanned the land below. The human had stopped in his tracks, eyes scanning the surroundings, calculating their next move. "They'll see us out here," Kira said, her voice tight with fear. "We can't outrun them." "Not in the open." The human didn't answer immediately. His gaze flickered briefly to her, then back to the ships above. "We don't need to outrun them. We need to outsmart them." Kira didn't ask how he planned to do that. She didn't have time. Instead, she kept her eyes fixed on the ships, her pulse racing. The desert felt so vast, so empty. There was nowhere to hide. Without warning, the human grabbed her arm again, pulling her toward a nearby rocky outcrop. Kira stumbled slightly but kept pace with him, heart hammering in her chest. He stopped just behind the outcrop, his breath steady despite the chaos around them. "Wait here," he instructed, his voice low and controlled. He was already moving away from her, vanishing into the rocks. Kira stood frozen, her eyes darting between the ships above and the direction the human had gone. The tension in the air was palpable. She could hear the hum of the engines as they came closer, closer to where she was hiding. She was exposed, but she had no choice but to trust him. She pressed herself flat against the rocks, trying to steady her breathing. She wasn't afraid. Not yet. But as the sound of the ships grew louder, Kira's mind raced. The human had said they didn't need to outrun the enemy, they needed to outsmart them. But how? What kind of plan did he have? Moments later, she heard a faint noise, almost like a click, followed by the distant sound of a ship's engine sputtering. She didn't know what it meant, but she knew it was the human. He was doing something. The question was, would it work? The ships passed overhead, their shadows darkening the sand as they scoured the area for any sign of life. Kira's heart skipped a beat as one of the ships began to descend, its enormous form casting a looming shadow over the desert. She held her breath, praying they wouldn't see her. She had no idea what the human had done, but she didn't care. She could only focus on staying hidden, on keeping her body still and silent. Seconds stretched into what felt like hours. The ship hovered above them for a moment, its engines whirring ominously. But then, to her surprise, it moved away, its lights scanning the ground below. It was gone. Kira exhaled, relief flooding her veins. They had done it. The human's plan, whatever it was, had worked. The human appeared from behind the rocks, a small grin on his face. "Told you," he said, his voice laced with a hint of satisfaction. Kira stared at him, her mind still reeling from the close call. "How? How did you do that?" He shrugged casually, but there was a glint of pride in his eyes. "Sometimes, you don't need to outrun them. You just need to make them think you're already gone." She could feel a new respect building inside her for him. He wasn't just some random survivor. He was a man of action, someone who knew how to get things done when it mattered. But even as she admired him, Kira knew they weren't out of the woods yet. The enemy hadn't given up. They were still out there, still hunting them. "We're not done," she said, her voice steady. "We need to keep moving. They'll come back." The human nodded, his expression serious again. "You're right. But for now, we've got time. Let's use it." They didn't speak much as they moved forward, both of them knowing that the real challenge was still ahead. But in that moment, Kira couldn't help but feel something stir inside her. The human, this stranger who had once seemed like nothing more than a nuisance, was starting to feel like something more. Something she couldn't ignore. Maybe, just maybe, they were in this together. But what else was hidden in the shadows? What other dangers awaited them? As they moved deeper into the desert, Kira couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. Something, or someone, was watching them. And she wasn't sure they were ready for whatever was coming next. Naughty question for comments. Who or what do you think is lurking in the desert, waiting for Kira and the human?